Committee, we call for the item 16 subcommittee of the Good Public Facilities Board of Education. Roll call, please.
David, here, Medley, here, Ramon,
Here.
Hennessy,
Here.
Flag,
Here.
Peterson, here, Schroeder,
Here.
you've sort of mentioned it now, but
Okay, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, against the republic for peace and for nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Agenda item number 6, discussion on Guthrie Public Schools long-range planning. You think this?
Thank you, Mr. President. We have, we've come a long way. There's a lot of discussion about, our next, capital projects, the, funding mechanism for them. The direction began when the board was freeze. Then convened the long range planning committee on the board of the freedom relating instead of convening a long range planning committee who finished up their work, presented it to this board, and the priorities as they can identify. And with that, with those priorities have developed budget figures along with potential funding options to begin to have the process started in our next bond resolution. And so the goal tonight is that we have the discussion about projects, about the budget numbers. We have our architect here who provided those, or Shog Millis from the Stacy Room, and then the funding and ultimately the what the bond election would include, and the ballot language that would go on there for consideration by the voters, with the ultimate goal in having this on the ballot for an August 27th election. And so there is not an action item on tonight's agenda, but there will be robust discussion about that. And what the ultimate goal tonight is that we provide the feedback to Ms. Dawson from Municipal Finance and to Mr. Willis from Stacy Group, that what we want to include, and then they will develop the ballot language along with the resolution that would be for your ratification at the May board meeting. That claim there.
I can't say they do.
I think because the deadline is so tight on June, I think that's why we're trying to have them May. So
Yeah.
So with that in mind, you have a package that was provided to you late last week, and Thursday or Friday they got it out to you. The page 1 is, of course, the Guthrie Public Schools Board of Education Long Range Planning Committee recommendations, and that's on pages 1 and 2. As we know, when this was presented to the board, there were 8 priorities that were identified, and of those 8, we have identified a method by which we can address, we believe, the first 5 to a certain degree. And then it will take additional funding from either building fund or a Red Bud fund or an additional bond issue for the remaining 3 that are on this list of priorities. We have kind of developed a tradition of about every 5 years doing a long range planning, which is somewhat standard for school districts now, given the need to develop plans for the bond package, get the work in the queue and get the work done, and then see where you are. One of the things that that is key to where we are as a district, and that is found on page 3 of your packet, and that is the try and make that a little bit large. That is the current capacitance. And as you look at this sheet, you can see that even, we've had this discussion twice already, either at committee or had this also at the board retreat. And since then, the numbers have jumped on Cotterill, where we are, we're essentially full. And so that is one item that is obviously will be addressed with current construction going on. But we also are mindful of the fact that we have over 900 homes platted inside the city limits, and give or take a few, probably around 1,700 or so homes, I would guess, that are planted inside the school district boundary. Growth is highly likely. I would say inevitable. And we're experiencing that. We've seen that even throughout this year. And so in preparation for that, that's what is critical about the next bond package that we have. We're going to add, when Cotterill is completed and we hopefully move in on time, which will be in the fall of 2025, that will add approximately 200 seats to what we currently have. Let me take that back. It'll be about 150 seats because we've got 350 in Cotterill right now. So we'll take that to 500. And so when we add those 150 seats, that will relieve some of the pressure. But as we talk through the retreat, this is continual growth. And so we have to develop a plan to be proactive as much as possible. So Thompson and I talked about the need for potentially 2 additional classrooms right now at Charter Oak that we are exploring the options in for next year. And then utilizing one portable that is currently not being utilized as a classroom at Cotterill to add a section there to relieve the overcrowding that's due to the classroom. So we have like 2. And so trying to develop the plan so that we can address where we are now, but also where we are headed, is what has taken us to the items that are listed on page 4. And so with that, the large capital projects that we have identified, and this was from through the long range planning process, and then the estimates are provided by Sean from Stacy Group. We also have we've developed a timeline based on when the financing could be, so that we have accounted for inflation at 4%. Is that correct, Sean?
Yeah, 4%.
Yeah, and so the good thing about the timeline of what we're going to show you is that with Cotterill, we have some potential savings because we could potentially begin construction before we demobilize with the current group that's there.
Question on that. Add 4 classrooms. How big's the wing? Wing's not just 4 classrooms, are they? The wing we cut, it wasn't just 4 classrooms.
There's 3 wings. One wing is 6, the other 2 are currently 4 with the room for the 2 additional.
Okay,
So
all right.
it'll be 3 wings and
Okay.
6.
So with that potential potential savings and the timeline, we tried to pair all of that so that we could get the most bang for our buck. The other part of this is trying to get, given the inflationary cost, we have the 38 acres that's on the east side of town. Utilizing that for a new elementary with the first phase being a capacity of 500 students, and getting that in the queue as quickly as possible, because you can see with his estimates on the cost, and this is to begin construction in 2029, I believe. That, you know, essentially we're talking about a similar building to what we are currently building in Cotterell and what we built at Charter Oak. And the cost at Cotterell is at $17 million, and the projection is $31.8 for the elementary, the new elementary that we would be building, with essentially the same amenities, similar construction and things like that. So getting that in the pipeline as soon as possible, because if we wait longer, then it's going to cost more, and we're going to be further behind on trying to be prepared for the growth. And then finally, the other item is we identified a serious need with the growth of girls wrestling. We simply do not have the facility. It was never created for that. And so trying to retrofit in what we have existing, we just don't have enough square footage. And so this is what we have priced out here, is a standalone building that would be solely for wrestling practice. It would not include locker rooms in the building. It would be much larger than what we have now, enough for 2 full-size mats and restrooms and a small walk area. And it would be located very close to the entrance to the current gym, with the stairs down into what we would renovate into a boys and girls wrestling locker room, where the current wrestling room is, and the locker room space. And let me be upfront that the $1.265 million, that does not include the cost of renovation for those locker rooms. We will have to identify some sources of funding for that. This is only for the building, but that's not to say that because the bond issue we're proposing, we'll get to that in a little bit, exceeds what these budget figures are.
How big is it?
The 80 by, I think we did 38 foot mats. I think it was like 80 by 50.
Yeah.
Something like
Yeah.
that.
So the match would be 30.
I think we did 38 foot mats.
Full size,
Yeah.
2 full-size mats, and then the walk space there, and we also have 2 restrooms there.
Yeah, I'm looking at cash and bill ordinance. Like 120. 60.
Yeah, right now, girls wrestling is sharing the coach's office for the dressing room. Yeah, they're just in the bathroom.
And Cody's working on a stopgap measure, but it's not what I would consider it. It's something that we need to be addressing and be proactive.
On the size of that building, that's based off the size that we have in that area, or is it just a comp that we use?
It was discussion of, we just need 2 mats and an area for 2 restrooms and a place for bags, and a little walkway between, you know, exercise bike, warm-up area. So just really trying to make that as efficient as possible.
And then down below on page 4, you see identification of needs that Mr. Thompson has identified. There's always going to be an endless amount of needs there. We have right now at least some help from the Redbud Fund, along with building fund dollars that are growing. And as our net assessed valuation grows, so will our building fund. So, you know, as an example, when I first became superintendent 12 years ago, I think our building fund was around 500,000 annually, and then Michelle, what is it now? That's 750.
1.2.
1.2.
Okay.
So you can see the growth that we've had with the NAV as it brings those local dollars in there. And so that, those are sources that we will rely on to address some of the needs with maintenance. And then again, what we're gonna have a discussion about is a figure that is larger than the 39 million that we were proposing, that is our budget. Okay, so on page 5, you see 4 charts, and those are timelines, because when we passed the bond issue in 2015, our goal was 15 mils. But you have to remember, we were at 0. So it was going to be about an 18% property tax increase across the board. When we went back to the voters in 2019, the goal was 17 mils. And each time the bond package has been the largest in the history of the school district. But we have to also be mindful of the fact that none of those figures have been adjusted for inflation. And so those figures, things cost more, and we have to adjust in order to build that, as evidenced by the budget figures we have for a new elementary versus the budget figures that we had for building Potter. So where we looked at all of this, we looked first at $40 million. And that was the initial discussion before we got all the budget figures. And that's when I asked to take the bond package to 45 million and see what that looked like. And compare that, the 45 million with 17 mils and with 20 mils. And so we had Sean put together his budget figures. Jerica put together the bond sales, keeping in mind that we can never exceed 10% of our net assessed valuation. We can never have that. That is what I always say is our credit card limit. And so when we look at that, Jerica has staggered these to get the money on the books so that we could fund these projects while not exceeding our debt cap of 10%. And these are, you guys that have been through this before with me, you know that there are a ton of moving parts to this. And many of them are variables that we're working under assumptions for. Probably the greatest variable that we have experienced with this in the 2 bond packages that we've put in front of the voters and they've supported. Probably the 2 biggest variables have been, or one single biggest variable is the NAV growth, because that is what fuels coming back and paying off your debt. And that is why the targets that I mentioned of 15 and of 17, we never got to at either period. And we still haven't. And so we assumed the last 2 years, and I'll put up here in just a little bit a very long historical of the NAV growth for this district. But the past 2 years have been 9.1 and 9.13% growth each of the last 2 years. And you'll see when I put that up how huge that is. What we have done, and the veterans in the group will remember these sheets, the big sheets here. You have one that says 17 mil target, and you have one that has 20 mil target. But each of these sheets have what you have on page 5, along with a whole lot more information. And it's a projection on when we would pay the money back and when we would gather the money from bond sales. But one of the most important parts to these sheets is at the very top, where Jerica has plugged in numbers that for this year, so it would be for the 3rd year in a row, a 9% net assessed valuation growth. But then after that, for succeeding years, it is at 5%. That is very conservative. We have utilized 4.5%, and now we're utilizing 5% for the, and that is why we have never reached our target, because we have assumed the growth at a very conservative number. And so that is where we base all of this on, to give us confidence in what we present to the voters. Now, you see that if you look back on page 5, we'll get to this. I mean, this you can get lost on this pretty easy. Sometimes I use a magnifying glass with it. But you can see on the 20 mil target, 20 mil levy, how the proceeds would come through. And you can see where we're talking about potentially beginning construction sometime in 2029 on the elementary school. So what happens if we stay at a 17 mil target? Well, we have to delay the school for a year. And you can see that from the chart above. And so you add roughly 4% to the cost of your construction. Sure.
At those 4 tables here, in case you're curious, these 2 were done in September when we did our first meeting. And one thing you might say, like, well, what's going on here? Because there's more money being sold. We had assumed we were a little bit more aggressive. We were further out from the target of an election, and we were just saying what might be possible. We had assumed 9% growth for the first 3 years of the bond at that point in time. And I just wanted to point that out in case there was any confusion. That's why we're really focusing on these bottom 2, because they were prepared with those more conservative assumptions in place. I think planning for 3 years of 9% growth would be a little bit aggressive, in front of an election. So sorry to interrupt, but I just didn't want to get caught up on those first.
I probably stole some of your thunder, but I wanted to kind of get to how all these moving parts are working together to get us to trying to put this puzzle together. Then going to page 8, page 6. When you look at the millage of, and what I included in this group right here is everyone from Logan County, everyone that's in the Oklahoma City metro area, and then I added Stillwater and Perkins, because they're both starting to show, Perkins starting to show a lot of growth, and Stillwater has maintained a steady millage of about 25 for a long time. But you can see where we are. And this is a product of a lot of things. We know we're behind. We know it got to 0. We know, you guys remember why it got to 0. And we're playing catch up. but we're also growing our NAV so fast that we can't get to the target level. And the thing that we have to keep in mind is that growth of NAV is why we need more bond issues, because we need more facilities, because we've got more kids. So it's one thing leads to another, and it's kind of a cyclical endeavor here. And so this would be a little bit, what we're talking about would be a little bit of tax increase. And so I had Jared run those numbers too. And all of that is listed very succinctly on page 7. And then this morning, Ben had asked about, I don't have this up on a slide, but Ben had asked about the 5A millage rates. So you got that at your table. And I need to fill in some blanks on some of this, because what I'll tell you on these millage rates is every one of these is a little different, because every community is a little different. Lawton and Altus, as we know, two communities that have large military installations. Enid is another one. Those three communities in our state have struggled mightily historically to pass bond issues. And the common thread of a military installation has something to do with it. So in Altus and in Lawton, they have, and Lawton has gotten theirs up, but they have been low at times. Both of those communities, along with Enid, passed sales tax that they had to work with their city, their city on to and pass the sales tax, because they couldn't pass a ad valorem bond. And you, Janae, and Tina were on. We actually had that discussion with the city of Guthrie about a potential sales tax. And we decided that the best course of action was to stay in our lane and stay with using millage from property taxes to fund our projects, and just work hard with the voters to make sure they're informed, make sure that we have involved everyone in the process to decide what goes on the ballot, and then deliver what we said we were going to deliver. And as you guys can remember from recent memory, we've had a great relationship with the city of Guthrie, where they have, they could do a bond as well, and they have chosen not to, and to fund the improvements with the city through sales tax and or a use tax. And that is something that we have worked well with the city on, to stay in our lanes so that we can take the community forward. Filling in a little bit more, for Pryor, Oklahoma, you see 15.48 as their millage. Pryor is a unique situation. With the Google farm there, I knew their building fund probably was pretty generous. And so I did a little research today, and what I found, I took down to Michelle and I said, "Is this right?" They get, what was ours? What'd you say? 1.2 million in building fund. Theirs last year was $12.7 million. And Stacy Group works with them, so that he knows it is a different set of circumstances. So, and it's kind of like and you've heard me say before, when we look at salary comparisons, for example, Pryor size-wise is a comparable district, but from a financial standpoint, they're an anomaly. And it's hard to compare them to us because of what they bring to the table. So I would issue that caveat about Pryor and thinking about how we can spend $12.7 million a year in building fund. Cody? I was afraid he'd say that. So the last 2 pages are kind of summaries of what we talked about. So what I'd like to do now is, Jerica, would you fill in what I missed?
Good segue into it because you covered the basics, and so I think we're prepped with why we have the 2 scenarios and where we're starting from. So I guess I'll start with why we're approaching it with this. And part of that is we're looking at how to prioritize those projects. So I started with I didn't start with the money and tell Mike what the money looked like. We started with the project, and I tried to get the money to fit. So with the project list that we have, here's my copy with all my scribbles on it. But this is the project list that you all have in front of you today. What I did first was say, how can I get that elementary school to fit in the 5-year inflation? You inflate it from this period. That's what you said it would cost in about 5 years. So my goal was to say, how do I get that elementary school to be built in 5 years? And so what you'll see, and I'm going to refer to the summary, which is your last sheet in the packet, is there's a line item for the new elementary phase 1. And there's a red box around those because starting in 2028, those bond sales are going to be dedicated toward elementary. So you'll sell bonds, you set them aside. The reason why we're doing it that way is because come up with things to start early. So you have those funds to start spending early, but even if you were going to all start in 2029, you're meeting that timeline. So the first thing I did was, like I said, how do we get that elementary school? And then what I went back and did, and there's a few iterations. We talked on the phone quite a bit on, priorities within these projects and some advantages on certain timing and how to fit it in. What we talked about is it would be really great to do those 2 elementary schools while you still have construction mobilized on Cobble right now with this current bond authorization that you have. So then I said, okay, how can I get that a little over $6 million that you need, like right off the bat, but not have it against the capacity by 2029? So they need to be paid off too. So these bonds in the early years are all really short-term bonds. I think we have 3-year, 2-year bonds. So they get, they hit your debt cap, they hit your mill levy, and then they roll off. And one reason why the 20 mill levy became important is so that you could sell larger amounts in those short-term bonds. Because, a real short-term bond, even if it's a smaller dollar amount, it's going to ramp up the mill levy. Like what we're doing this year, where we're selling $3 million, but it's going over a 10-year period, it doesn't affect the mill levy like it does when you're doing a 3-year term. If that makes sense. So that's where the 20 mil became really important, is it allows you. It wasn't so much about this new elementary; it was about the other projects and how you get those prioritized earlier in the cycle. There's a couple of reasons that's advantageous. One is the cost effectiveness of starting construction earlier, but the other that I find talking to districts is the impact on the voters to see that, hey, we just voted on this project and they're starting on this project and they're finishing this project. And so then by the time you get to the tail end and you're doing the things that maybe aren't quite so flashy, know, and we do have a little bit of money for your maintenance fees up front. And ideally, if you do grow faster, if you do hit that 9% growth for a few years instead of just the 1 year, you can move some of that up as well. You don't have to, we're not stuck to this exact sales schedule. We can accelerate things if we have the possibility to do so. But, like I said, the point is, it really allows you to kind of get these projects done that are critical, including the girls wrestling program renovation. And that's not possible with the 17 mil levy. Your new elementary build is somewhat impacted by the 17 mil levy because of it needing to shift out probably at least a year at its growth phase. But it's really those other projects that become more impacted from a timing standpoint. The other thing is overall, I was kind of marking on my own version over here, is with the higher mill levy, you're able to have a little bit more in contingency. You're able to have more toward, I would think I was able to cover with 17 mills, I was able to cover all the identified maintenance projects, but not the line item for those, we always call them unknowns, that you know they're gonna happen, the unknown knowns. Like you're gonna have a maintenance project that you just don't know what it is right now. So we weren't able to address the full maintenance dollar amount of 4.15 million. But under the 20 mil levy, we set aside all that money plus had a little bit of contingency. And then ideally, the growth continue, we could accelerate some of those smaller project dollars as well.
One thing to keep in mind that we also, this bond sale that we worked on for just the other night, that's going to sell in, yeah, okay, that was originally supposed to be August, I think?
Yeah.
And we moved it up because of our NAV growth, we were able to do that. So there's an example of being flexible with that schedule, because if you look back at this sheet or this, the one like this that I provided before the last bond issue, it would be for an August sale. But we were able to sell it sooner so that we can get that money moving through quicker. And that's a product of our growth.
2 years has been over 9%, and then what was anticipated was 4.5%, right? So it's literally double, right? And so we weren't static with the plan. So we may be under the target mill levy, but we weren't static with the plan. But we really worked hard in this previous, just because of knowing how hard it was to get bonds passed and wanting to be very respectful of your voters, that we weren't exceeding a target that had been so vocally communicated as this is our number. We always work to not exceed 17 mils. And that just creates a different, coming in under that number than if you say, this is our target. And most of the time you still won't exceed your target, particularly not materially, but when you're really working to do not go over, it causes you to kind of hide it under generally because you're being so conservative.
And I think Jericho would say that not every school district will set that.
No, mostly it's looked at as an average, but every community is different, and you do have, it is very important that if you feel like you've communicated something specific to your voters, if you communicated don't exceed, then you want to try and work for that. If you're communicating this is truly a target, and there's things that happen with NSF valuation, with excess collections, like we don't know how many people are going to pay their property taxes on time. Those sorts of things impact. Now, the way it's levied, we make sure it always covers, so there's not so much the risk like, you won't pay enough, but sometimes you get, they levy a 5% excess every year. And so that's where I say you don't know exactly how much you're going to collect. If you really do good on collections, it drives it down further. Then maybe, you have a few that are behind. So.
What I've got up there right now is all the way back to 2005, our net assessed valuation. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and then I lost some of it on the screen. But you can see what we said about the growth right here. But one thing that Ron and I had a conversation last night on the phone about the fact that it is highly unlikely that we would be in a negative or even in something potentially below our assumptions, given these historical figures. And let me preface all of this also with, because Jarek and I were talking through this today, the 2011 figure, that was the housing crush. And
There's a couple of them were impacted in 11.
but then, okay, so what happened in 2014? Well, because I kind of thought about this, but then Jericho reminded me.
What we're seeing there is when our assessor lowered our assessment ratio.
And so that was not what the gap was on that higher assessment ratio, was not chargeable either. And so that took us on a big hit that year. And a couple things are in place now. First of all, they can't lower it anymore. It's constitutionally at its lowest level. Secondly, because of her actions at the time, legislation was put in place that requires a whole lot more than just her signing a piece of paper. So, but you can see where that had a difference back then.
You wanted me to kind of highlight with
I don't
some
think
different-
so. I think, we've got a lot of things on the table here. The projects
That we've identified, the funding mechanism, the estimates that we have for what they cost, and the outlook. We were talking at the board meeting last Monday night about what interest rates we're doing, things like that. I saw a report today where there's talk that they may age down just a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, and inflation is inching down just ever slightly as well. So I guess the next thing is discussion and what you guys thoughts, concerns, or whatever.
Well, I think a few things as we've gone through, the 5A, looking at the 5A school districts, not every, just because they're 5A, not every district is created equal. I think, if you look at the top 7 or 8 schools, there's Fallbrook, Collinsville, Glenpool, Elgin, Arena. Those are schools that are growing, as opposed to, an Altus or a Guyman that's been, that size for a long time, or maybe even possibly, I don't know exactly, but I'm assuming they're not growing. Times maybe even going the other way. So I think looking at that, it's hard to. We're definitely on the bottom part of that, but I think we also have to realize the position we're in. No matter what the numbers, I think our eyeballs tell us. And to me, I think we talk about getting these up front, which I think is very important. Because I look at the high school that's 49 kids from being capacity, and that's not even that's not even our window right now. We're just trying to get caught up with elementary. So you think where they're going to be in 5 or 10 years when we haven't even got to that building yet. So to me, time is of the essence, and you could wait a year on elementary, but elementary would probably be fine. But we're pushing back. The older kids, they're going to be having portables and everything else out there at high school to make room for them. So I'll turn to anybody else. I just got his thoughts more than anything.
My thoughts were the same when they're talking through.
The sub 1 or 2 is
jail on the bottom half of the building.
You know, I've lived in this community now for 12 years, and I've studied a lot of it. I've not lived in here, lived here as long as Ben or Ron or Tina or Janae, but I've looked at it very critically. And what I've seen is, I think we have made a move because we have delivered what we said we were going to do. I think this community, I think they're like a lot of communities, that they're skeptical about what you're gonna do with their tax dollars. And that's probably a healthy thing for any community. But when we are demonstrating and showing them good faith, transparency, and delivering on what we promised we were going to do, I think that makes a huge difference in what we do and what we should expect going forward. And I will tell you, and I've told you before, the growth that we are experiencing is because of the bond issues that we passed. Because the developers have told me that. Ideal Homes would not be here if we had not passed bond issues first. There's no doubt in my mind that Shaw and Roush Coleman would not be building homes in our community if we hadn't passed bond issues first. You might have some independents that are currently building that would, but you notice that they are much more deliberate in how they have approached this, and that the others have pushed us to where we've got to do something.
The new elementary, we're talking about 29. I'm assuming that would have the capacity to be added on to as well.
Yes, without a doubt. Yeah. And you know, we all know that Fogarty has major ADA issues. The building itself, I think, is solid. I think it's got some mechanical challenges but we've righted a lot of that ship with the restroom work that we did. But you know, the ultimate goal should be to figure out what the use is for Fogarty going forward if we're going to. But if we make that ADA accessible, we're going to take the capacity of 500 down to probably quite a bit less by the time you put in enough elevators to meet ADA compliance.
What's the age of Central and the age of Fogarty comparatively? Because those are the next obvious two schools.
Fogarty was a 1937 build, I believe, and then Central is a 1929 build. But Central is essentially ADA compliant for the most part. It's got an elevator. You know, when they built onto Central, they put an elevator in and did some things there. You know, the challenge at Central is obviously there's no gym and there's no, you know, the parking lot's not ours, and you're landlocked, major landlocked. And so, but Central for by and large is a good building. It's been well maintained, and we've taken good care of it. And we've taken good care of Fogarty. It's just got the way it was designed, it's just got some challenges for what the school needs to be today.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we didn't even hit the junior high.
No, and
You know, like
I
there's-
think,
I mean, we've got to start, it's a start.
and that kind of goes back to what we laid out with the long range plan, is getting to a point where we can put the 5th grade in our elementaries so that we can make the shift and look at Guest being a junior high and taking only 1 grade into the current junior high building so that we can begin those renovations.
I know that part of me's like, we can't wait, but we have to wait, you know, like, I'm like,
And
2020,
and, you
I'm
know,
like.
this is a discussion that Jerica and I had also, because there are some ways where we could do this sooner through lease revenue bonds. But, we know the history of that one attempt. And I don't think that, personally, I don't think that we're there with the community where we can go ask them for that yet. I think we've got to show them more. Because we could get, what'd you figure out that we could do?
It's been a while since I looked
Yeah,
at those numbers,
but-
but we could, I feel like it was like we could start on the new elementary in like 2026. You would still, I think I had it where you would still sell like 4 million in this upcoming bond sale that could go toward an elementary renovation or something, and you could probably still look at this it was a different strategy at the time. So you could look at this, probably the same 6 million sale that we have in this first year. And then in 2026, you would do a lease revenue bond. It would bring in the entire 30 million requested for the elementary on day one. And then you'd be selling bonds for 8 years to pay the lease revenue bond, and likely some of those would go toward the other projects as well. So they might not holistically go toward the lease revenue bond. You have a little bit of.
I don't know what that finance charge is. It wouldn't be $31 million project if you did it
Right.
next year. You wouldn't have the 20%.
It's,
But I don't know what that, if it is in the same amount of money.
I don't either, because you don't know when you're gonna sell it, what's gonna happen in 2026. But I'm getting geared up for a lease revenue bond for another district right now that we're looking at. The market's gone up a little bit lately, so let's just say 3.5. So right now, let's say it's a 3.5% interest rate, you're under inflation costs, but it's still a hard concept to explain. And I understand that, but it's like you're gonna pay it in inflation, or you're gonna pay it in interest. Is generally why school districts approach it that way. They don't approach it that way because they're willing to just pay more money to do it today. It's a time value.
It's a hedge against inflation.
It's a hedge against inflation. And sometimes it's been a great hedge, like districts who did the 2018 lease revenue bond and beat inflation on what happened in 2020. They didn't know that was gonna happen, but there's times where that is a major win. And then there's times where you're.
Last year construction went up about 35%. So that's, we're lucky where Cotterell bid in just a little before that. And so we got in on the regular inflation, but not the big one. And so there are a lot of districts who couldn't build their buildings at all.
Yes.
Because of that 35%. They passed a bond issue 5 years ago, and now they're cutting the buildings in half.
Well, and if we hadn't had the ESSER money to do these other projects, we couldn't have built Cotterell. I mean, that's just the reality to it, because Cotterell was, when we passed this bond, Cotterell was a $13 million project. That's now 17 million. And, gosh, a 100-year pandemic wasn't in the forecast at the time.
I was looking at the wrestling building and I brought up Cash High School because they built one 4 years ago for $800,000. So you're the 1.2 with the 35%. That's very comparable.
The numbers are, it is kind of shocking to see those when you're used to seeing smaller numbers. It just hasn't been seen around here. So
The idea of $31 million for an elementary school, Sean and I were joking about that the other day, because I would have never thought that.
Joking, like if you don't laugh, you'll cry.
Yeah. It's like, this is
really a joke, or is this real? Wake me up from the stream.
Jericho, what happens if, we're using 4% inflation to base our projected cost on it? As we sit here, we look at $40 or $45 million bonds. What happens if that inflationary cost exceeds and say jumps to 5 or 5.5%?
On
This timeline.
any of our projects. So what we would look at is, so if it's just inflation, we would look at, okay, we have to delay the start of, if we have enough money in the door today to start it. One thing I like about how the sale is currently structured is it's about 18 months at least to build an elementary school. So we have the ability to sell some bonds in 2030 for the elementary school as well. So it's possible that if inflation went up, you would have to put more of your 2030 money, and then maybe your contingency that we have kind of sitting there would go away. It's no longer contingent very likely scenario, if it were inflation to that order. If it's inflation to the order of another 30%, we'd be looking at replanning on, okay, how do we approach this now?
And we have money in this, on one of the sheets, it talks about that number includes all the soft costs. And there's two contingency line items. There's a design contingency, a construction contingency. And the design one is really because we have no idea what this building's gonna look like. We haven't talked about number of classrooms, and so that gives you some flexibility of, we kind of know the target classroom number, but if we needed one extra classroom or two extra classrooms, there's some money in there to go towards those unknowns that we haven't figured out yet. And maybe it doesn't have to get added, and that contingency can go towards inflation if we have to. That's just sort of a hedge on us of the unknown, because will be 2 more teachers or 2 more offices because the way you organize the school changes, or bigger playgrounds, or those kinds of things. And so we try to build a little bit of that in, but it would not cover anything that's significant.
And I'll say this, having gone through this twice with Sean on new builds, I think the Stacy Group firm is very good at identifying the costs and giving us estimates that are spot on and I think that was highlighted with the previous experience with the construction manager that we cut ties with, because their perspectives on what the cost was going to be for Cottrell and what the architect's estimates were so off that we knew there was a disconnect. And my experience been with Sean that they were generally spot on with it. And so I think that highlights my confidence in them. And that's based on the work that we've done together.
Another benefit of getting some of those other smaller construction projects completed in the early cycle is you have one variable off the table early in your bond cycle when it comes to, all of the construction projects are not being done.
Those additions should be pretty, you're talking about just a year in the future, so you're a lot safer.
And they're straightforward projects. We shouldn't have any, you start to get to an elementary with a new site, there's some surprises that whether we have to do a bridge or a road, and there's some things over there that can throw money. These are just classrooms, there's not really a lot of site work. So.
And they're not really renovations, they're add-ons to recent construction. One of the things that we've had so much fun with, right, Cody, is the renovations at the high school. And what we found, we had some of that at Fogarty. We know what's behind those walls because we just built them, or we're building them right now. And
Michael and I talked to, one of the advantages of doing Cottrell right away with Crossland on site is we designed that building not knowing when the addition would happen. So we have the end of those classrooms have brick and they're finished. So we could stop that, not do that work, get a credit back, knowing we're going to add right onto it. If we had to waterproof it for 60 days or something, we could. But we're not spending money that you're going to turn right around and cover back up with your box. So you'll have some savings there, not only on the building itself, but hopefully even on, if we can really speed it up, then there's going to be some general conditions at the time. The money that the contractor charges to be there will be compressed because they can kind of do both of it at the same time. They've already built those costs in, supervision costs.
So it's like, hurry up, get this built, but,
Right.
well, take your time.
Right.
We were talking about maintenance, so HVAC, we have that a lot in the certain buildings that we think need to be upgraded, or is it just kind of in general?
High school, Fogarty, Central. Those units have been there, they're past their age now. Remember at the high school, just know this, the children, the board, we have talked a lot about like we see front. Is this intersection of that building, the north wing and the south wing are all package units. And they've been there for quite some time. We've replaced some of them, still got a lot to go. Fogarty, we had the COVID year, spring break and everything. We probably replaced close to half of them, I guess, about half of them. So we still have more to replace there. And then Central, the south main that was built later on, its packaging is not part of the chiller board system. So those need to be replaced as well. And there's some other ones outliers everywhere else.
So we're putting a new chiller boiler at Central this summer, correct?
Correct. Well, hopefully, yes.
Yeah. We're using Redbud money to do that.
Yes, it's all about, the decision we make on the chiller, the one that we're proposing, you should be able to do it this summer.
Yeah.
The board's on the issue, with the chiller is there.
So I noticed that there's no technology money here.
And that is, but there is, if you look on page 9, because it's broken down. Maintenance, technology, security, parking lots.
Really
So it's
put the back
lumped
end
under
together.
that.
Yeah. And you know, that has always been kind of the variable when we've done a bond issue of trying to dedicate as much as we can to technology, but knowing that may move based on construction costs of providing the voters the things that we have promised them with the large capital projects.
So you got a little bit of budgeted up front on that, on, 2027 year on that maintenance technology, and it doesn't back until the end. Is there anything specific in there that we should know about that 373,000? I mean, is it?
That was money, I mean, that was money that was basically, okay, you don't have to use that on construction, so you can use it. So it wasn't a number that,
Yeah, we don't have a line item of
it looks really specific because I was trying to.
but I have full confidence in these two guys that if we task them with that, they can come up with something that is 3 times that in about 15 minutes. But, you know, just be clear, we're not going back to buying used computers from Edmond Public Schools. Promise.
I want to throw something else out, and Michelle will remember, it was 5 years ago that we bought that land out there and stood at the site that day to buy that. If you look at how soon we can build this, it's gonna be at least another 5 years, probably before we can get it in the door to start. So we're looking at probably 12 years before we can deliver. Most all of us, every kid that we're associated with will be in and out of school, but I think we do have a definite consideration to give to the district in terms of when we bought it, we need to do something with it, you know, and we need to deliver that aspect too.
Goes back to slide that I had from the last bond campaign. Would you plant a tree here if you knew that you'd never get to enjoy the shade?
How many acres are there?
38. And you know, some of that's in floodplain, but there's some really good land there and a lot of accessibility options and some really good potential for green space that could be used for ball fields and things like that.
There's a lot of dirt to be cleaned out on this side, so you move all that over there for.
Yeah, you take a lot of it out and yeah,
There's a lot of dirt.
there's a lot of potential with that land. And I knew that when we first were looking at it.
Well, yeah, and you think about it, we don't have a competitive track where we can host meets. We have to have 8 lanes to run track meets. We don't have a soccer field designated for our soccer teams. I mean, there is so many things.
The cross-country course could be done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got one of the best cross-country programs in the state.
Jared, I know you crunch numbers all the time, but as we look at this net assessed value growth, and something that I always think about is, it's got to factor into this. When we look at the range of mortgage rates, I mean, do you give consideration, let's just say things get out of kilter like inflation and blah, 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 say 1 or 2 more percentage, how will that affect us? I mean, is that gonna bump the net asset value, is it gonna bump it down 1 or 2 points, or?
That would be hard for me to
I
predict
figured
that.
yeah.
But I think that's one reason why we go with something like just because you're growing at 9% right now. And what we really look at is what is platted, like what has already been marked for construction. Like what do we know today? Because it's so hard to predict what we don't know. So we say, okay, how comfortable are we with 5% growth? And we feel pretty comfortable with that just because of historical levels. And even with the rate environment that we've seen, it's not yet affected some of that growth that you've seen. Because interest rates have been higher for mortgages now for a couple of years, right? They started really going back a couple of years ago. And you're still seeing these homes being built. So I guess I don't have a crystal ball on that, but where we try and hedge for what could happen is being a little bit more conservative on our net assessed valuation by looking, what happened the last 5 years, what happened the last 10 years, but also recognizing the fact that just like we could accelerate the payment plan, we could, put the brakes on if we needed to. Like we don't want that to be the case. We don't want to put that out there, but if we needed to, because we had a lower growth year, that's one thing we have to address, just like inflation could be a factor that we have to address from a construction standpoint if something strange happened with the economy.
Well, I bet there's a lot of properties as well that were built 5 or 10 years ago. There were 250,000, but they're being assessed now at 350, but their taxes are only going 3% a year, so
Yes.
that's gonna keep,
That's what I should have brought up.
that's gonna keep
Well,
going up. whenever-
And truly it is a big factor is we know that even with the new properties are a little different, right, that are coming into town because those are getting assessed at their full value once they're occupied. But these properties, and Dr. Simpson's talked a lot about within your, kind of downtown area, a lot of the renovation that happens. Again, those get turned over, but then when the properties around them kind of rise up with everything else, there's a limit to the growth on that. And so that kind of hedges against a little bit of what could happen even with like new home buyers in the market, because you do have, I call it pent up growth within your system because of what has been capped at that 3% now.
One of the things that I kind of sense we'll see also is, that it's slowing people down from buying a new home with the interest rates, because we've gotten into this pattern that we've all probably done at some point of, okay, I'll just go get a refinance when the interest rates go down. And if you're in it long enough that you don't lose money by doing that, it's not a bad strategy, given the fact that with the interest rates where they are, it will keep the price lower than when the interest rates go down. So when the interest rates go down, the price on that property is going to go up because the inventory is going to supply and demand. Yeah, I know it seems crazy because they're so expensive now compared to what we all paid for our homes. But I was talking to one of my brother-in-laws about that just a couple weeks ago, and I really hadn't thought of it that way. But it's there's a lot of truth to that.
I haven't talked to the assessor within Logan County, but in talking to some of the other assessors that we work with, they really think that a minimum of 3% growth in a lot of counties for a handful of years would be what you should expect because of how rapidly it grew over the last 2 years and that limit.
You've talked quite a bit about the 900 homes that are platted within city limits and these new additions, but here's something that always sticks in my mind is we can't get a grasp on the number of homes that are in the outlying areas and how that will affect the student population. I mean, I wish we could to kind of help us a little bit more with that
It's a lot of driving around.
Well, tick marks,
Yeah. You'll remember
Dr. Simpson,
those maps, yeah.
when Eddie talked to our leadership step three class,
Yeah.
he said 2,500.
In the outlying
putting all the dots on the map.
including in and out.
Yes, including the internet.
Do we use a factor when we take that 2,500 times? I mean,
I generally, what I've kind of spitballed is around 33 to 35% of those homes will produce students. It's kind of bad way of putting it. But, eventually have students. And that, but some of that is just that's an average based on the type of home that's being built. The homes that are being built in this town right now are homes for young families. I mean, that's.
So, looking at these numbers of where we're at in capacity, and to Chris's point, we're looking at the high school within, we're less than 50 students being max capacity, and I know we've got some classes that are coming up through the ranks that are a little larger. And ultimately our goal is to be able to shift the fifth graders to the elementary school so we can then adjust capacity upward, I should say. What are we looking at? How long before we're gonna be able to provide some relief to the high school? And then what are we gonna do in the interim? Because, looking at this, we're.
One thing I'd say, first of all, is that figure of 976 includes Blue Jay Academy and Faith. Okay, so it's not truly as high as all that because they're part of high school. And I think you have more flexibility at a secondary site to utilize your classroom space. Because you can, it's not ideal, but I've done it as a teacher before. You can have teachers that travel and utilize spaces that are open during planning periods. You can get by, and we already have it, but you can get by with larger class sizes. It doesn't affect instruction as much at the high school level as it does at the primary grade, especially the lower grades. And so those are some things that to consider on why I chose to focus on the elementary level first to get us to the next step of relieving the capacity levels that we have at the secondary level. And I think that, I've said it time and again, we needed, in fact, when I first got the job here, I said, we need $100 million tomorrow, and I call that a start on what we need. Well, now we're growing, and we need
$200 million.
$300 million. But you can't eat, the only way I know to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And so that's the approach that we've taken. And it's not gonna happen overnight. Kind of go back to, imagine where we would be if we never built charter oaks.
Well, and and me personally, I now to the point where I can't imagine where we're going to be if we don't do something now.
So that Cotterill capacity is 350 in there, so with that change, we'll get
500.
500. And what's the added classroom, what's that?
Probably another 100,
Yeah.
25 classrooms.
So.
Go from 350 to 600 eventually. and then go to, I think 700 at Charter Oak.
So that'll alleviate, then the lines will have to be redrawn.
Yeah.
On what,
So using his number, 2,500 new homes, and using 33%, you get 825 students, new students. If you had this 10 classes, and then the classes we're at in Cotterell, and what we have left at, we have 890 will be full capacity.
Not building enough now, are we?
So we have to continue,
But
but we can keep up with it.
yeah, and the thing, keep in mind that it's like I try to tell everybody that's ready to jump off the ledge about the homes built in town and infrastructure, water, everything else. They're not gonna be all built tomorrow. They will be, when you look at the historic growth in this community and pair that with our enrollment growth, it has somewhat followed the economy. But, you look at the other thing that happened in 14, and Jerica, this was the other thing to pair with that. That was when, and if I had our enrollment numbers, if I remember right, they dropped right in there too. That pairs with a depressed energy sector right then, and we lost some students because their parents worked in the energy field, some form or fashion, and their jobs went away. And so that, along with the assessor's actions, caused that. So there was economic as well as a change in how the taxes were collected as well. The economy has something to do with it, but the fact that they're platted, it's kind of like our neighborhood. That whole thing was platted in what, 05? Okay, it's just now full. And if you look at the growth in our neighborhood, it has been when the economy was robust and they start building homes, and then they back off when the economy slows down. But it is full now, and it sure wasn't when we moved in, nor when you moved in. But it has grown.
I think the biggest selling point on this whole thing is going to be adding on to Cotterell all we can to begin with. The public is seeing that one being built, they're gonna say, we already built Charter Oak, why do you need more? Because the people in town are oblivious to what's happening in South County, many of them are. If they see that, hey, we had to hold back on Cotterell because of inflation costs, construction costs, and we have the opportunity to go ahead and get what we need, I think that was so within the city limits more than anything else.
And the fact that we've got walls on it.
Yeah,
That's what made me
Exactly.
You actually see
That's
construction
exciting.
today.
When do they cut that?
Yeah.
Well,
Supposed to.
I was so excited yesterday morning, I'm like, I can't wait to drive by, and then I'm like, no walls, and then,
They couldn't get the crane in.
and then today, I'm like, oh, we see walls, and I'm like, oh, no walls. And I thought, yeah, it's too windy,
Don't want them to fall under the bubble.
but they were still working after, when I drove by it.
I drove by it, right at 6 yesterday, and they were still,
Yeah.
had a concrete work up.
Yeah, so when are the walls coming now? Tomorrow?
Supposedly the 18th is what they said.
Oh, the 18th.
Thursday,
Yeah.
Okay.
They thought they'd have 4 walls up on
yeah,
Thursday.
Thursday,
Yeah.
4 panels.
Yeah.
That would be a good time.
I was like, okay, they built the road, I feel like I'm, need to put on my hard hat and walk out here.
Call me before you do that.
No, I'm just gonna put me on a little orange vest and yellow shirt and go out there like I know what I'm doing.
What's next step?
Well, is there anything that we've laid out here that gives you
Is there, upper elementary, we got 511 now. Junior high, 468. It's average almost 500 kids. Well, in 4 years, we expect all in the high school at 2,000 kids, and we got capacity for 1,000.
We don't have, we've got four, what do we have at the high school, or at the junior high?
468, 511,
468,
you got 980.
Average of 489.
Truthfully, at the high school, nobody's there all the time. I mean,
That's true.
they're off on sports.
You've got
they're
100
current, they're-
100 in Meridian.
High school is not as filled up in the building as,
Well, I'm just
It's a
saying,
number
we're,
set.
I'm hearing that the high schools, I've got a daughter that goes there, and some kids, some classes are sick, and we've got capacity for 1,025, and we're expecting 1,958, in 4 years.
Where are you getting 1,958?
From the upper elementary to junior high, it's 4 years,
You got 511 and 468.
You're looking at optimal capacity, because you're looking at max capacity for those two schools.
And,
versus current.
and keep in mind
Okay,
the
I've
upper,
got-
That's two
That's
grades.
2 grades, my bad.
And junior high,
keep in mind in the upper elementary too, that we've got a wing that is just being used for special ed too, so, yeah. I was gonna say, have me wonder if I missed something. I guess, yeah, is there anything that, with what we've talked about, that gives anybody heartburn? I mean,
Here's one that really sticks out to me when you look at the availability of funds, and I'll say this up front, I'm never in favor of the tax increase, but when you look at these numbers and the way that the money's provided, the bulk of the money to fund this elementary school coming 1 year sooner is $1.3 million difference than a year later, and that basically pays for our wrestling room.
okay.
So the time value of money is worth a lot in that situation.
And
I think we're being so proactive. I mean, I think just alone, like the wrestling, that we're listening, we see the needs and we're acting. We're not, which has not always been the case.
I go back to what this group has done by involving these people. Those folks that gave of their time to go through all of this, and Tina went through with them, and I know that some of you have done that before. It's a lot of work. I mean, it's a strong commitment, and these folks that have given of their time, they are invested in this too, and they are a big part of what we're talking about tonight. And I can assure you, some of them, when they see the recording, Chris is not here tonight, but when they see the recording, they're gonna watch this meeting. Because they are invested in this too. I guess the thing that I would ask is are there any other questions or anything that gives anyone heartburn about this that we need to flesh out? Because if not, I want to turn Jerica loose with, on drafting the.
Getting you an agenda item.
Yes, and all of that.
There's no action item, but we've got two different proposals here.
Yeah.
Or basically
And
four.
you see the difference,
Honestly,
yeah,
we've got four.
realistically, you got two. And you see the difference of 17 and 20.
Right.
And my recommendation to you guys is to go with 20 and to go with the 45 million, because I don't think the 40 million addresses our needs. And when I started, but I wanted to make sure and provide that to you to let you know that was considered, and the 17 mils was considered. We didn't dismiss any of this.
And we explored it based, comparing it with our needs.
I mean, our needs are just so great. I mean,
But I go back to, I want you guys to see all of the work that went in from a lot of different people to try and get to this point where we can tie this up with a bow and get it ready, to put on a ballot. Is silence affirmation?
Okay. We got a lot of work to do between now and August.
We do, we do. But we've, I go back to, is this more work than building a school 13 miles from this building and an 18% tax increase? See, we benefit from the work that we've done before as well. This builds on that work.
Oh, I agree with
And I say too, the 40 to 45, from our experience, the total number doesn't, I think that's so abstract to everyone. Bond issues now are, Oklahoma City was a billion, people pass 300 million, they're 80 million. Where it didn't used to be that way. I think it has more to do with, do they buy into your need? I think it's all about the district and the need. It's not, they're not voting on that number.
Right.
So you need it, and that's.
And I mean, we've done.
Well, and people will just look at, how my taxes
Right.
increase.
Right.
And we've done a great job in the past of educating the public, and I think, being very transparent with everyone about everything has gotten us to where we're at, and so there's no reason to, change any of that.
No,
We're gonna approach it the same way we've done the last two.
What we've done works. And what we're doing works. Well, hearing that, I think I would ask Jerica to move forward at 20 mil language for $45 million and have the agenda items ready for us.
And the big thing on what you're voting on is the 45 million as well as the projects. So the projects themselves are important. That's when you're specific about your project, you have to spend at least 80% toward that project allocation. That's the big thing that we're locking into is the 45 million, but also the specific kind of amounts that we're allocating. And you only have to identify 75% of your total 45 million. That's up to the district on, do you want to identify 100% or do you want to?
We generally, I think as long as the language is general enough with the maintenance, safety, and security, and that's where we have used that to give us flexibility for the duration of the bond sale, so that if needs come up that should be addressed that were unforeseen at the time of the election,
You have the ability to be that flexible.
Yeah.
You also, just so you know, if something great happens and things get under your current estimates, that is an exception to the 85% spending. Like if you can prove I delivered the project that the voters voted on, but it just costs less, then you can move those toward other projects that were voted on within the same.
Great training.
Sometimes you get mad.
It has happened, but it's been a while.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Thank you guys for being here. Appreciate it. I'd like to thank the staff as well. I know they did a lot of work into this, so we appreciate you guys. Of course, the long range planning committee and the work they've done to put this in front of us. I think they did a great job and gave us a good blueprint. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Davis.
Yes.
Smedley.
Yes.
Gerard.
Yes.
Husky.
Yes.
Flag.
Yes.
Pearson.